Hi, this is John with FirstTimeHomeBuyerSchool.com, and we have another podcast of First Home Stories from a great friend of mine from high school. And she was telling me this story the other day, and I thought, well, this has a great moral to it, a great lesson, and it's about what it was like to buy a home before home inspections and home inspectors were an industry. They didn't exist really in 1970, and they slowly developed. So her story is about buying a home before home inspectors became common. So great, Bobbie. I really appreciate you hanging out here on a beautiful day.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here and tell the story.
Set the scene. What was going on in your life first?
Okay, so
And when did
newly,
you start looking and all that?
sure. So newly married, been living in an apartment where we were paying $130 a month rent in Phoenix, Arizona, back in 1977, 78. And so we were going to buy a house, and this is back in when Phoenix, the prices were really starting to go up. Interest rates were starting to climb, and we were rushing to find one of the last houses in Phoenix, Arizona under $30,000. So there was a certain amount of pressure because houses were selling quick. You couldn't find a house. If you waited for a house to come out on the MLS, by the time you went and saw that house, it would be sold.
This was what year?
78. So my father-in-law was a realtor, and he would get the hot sheet, so it would come out before the MLS listing. And so we found this house, this very, very cute adobe home in central Phoenix, built in around 1920.
So the exterior walls were adobe?
Yeah.
As well as the interior walls?
The interior walls were not adobe, but the exterior walls
Okay.
were, and they were like adobe, 18 inches thick. So it was a really cool little two-bedroom, 1,000-square-foot house. So we looked at it, made an offer. It was accepted. Now, my father-in-law was a realtor, so we used him to represent us. And my father was a contractor. So between having a realtor broker for a father-in-law, a contractor for a father, you would have thought that we would have been in pretty good shape to buy a house. Well, so we made a offer, and it was included that the seller would leave the gas stove, and there was a few other items that would remain with the house. So when we took possession, I have this vivid memory of walking in the back door.
So you pick up the keys, it closed.
Yep, everything is good.
Your father-in-law gets the keys.
Yep.
Opens the house up.
And we walk in the back door into the kitchen in this little old house. And the first thing I notice is the stove is gone. We specifically wrote in the contract that the stove had to remain with the house. It was a gas stove, and they had taken the stove. Well, unfortunately for all of us, when they took the stove, there was no valve on the gas line coming out of the wall. So the gas line was coming out of the wall, and there was no valve to turn off the gas. And in order to be safe, they didn't want the house to blow up, at least, they lit the end of the gas pipe coming out of the wall. So when we walked in the kitchen, the stove was gone. The pipe coming out of the wall has a flame about a foot long shooting out the end of the pipe. So I was freaked out. I thought, how can this be? How come it hasn't blown up yet or whatever?
They were being thoughtful. They didn't want to poison you.
He didn't want to poison us or
filled.
have an explosion, so he just lit the end of the gas pipe with a match or a lighter, and at least there was no gas filling up the house. It was like a giant pilot light, maybe, I don't know. So we quickly ran outside, out back, and turned off the gas so we didn't have to worry about the gas line being lit and
So
burning.
you think the sellers took it, or it was just stolen out of the house?
No, the sellers took it because we tried to get a hold of them, and they left the state. They were nowhere to be found. So there was a sigh of relief. Okay, well, they stole the stove, and we'll just have to get a new stove. We'll have to put a valve on the end of that pipe, obviously, so you can turn off the the gas, all right. So you're kind of recovering from that, and your heart rate is going back down. And I turned on the.
I've never heard of this before, of a open gas line
I had never heard of
with
it
flame
since
shooting out
either.
a foot. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
Well, so then it gets better from that. After we calmed down from that one, I turned on the light switch in the kitchen. We haven't even left the kitchen yet. We turned on the light switch in the kitchen, and it had this old-fashioned globe against the ceiling with kind of fog
Oh,
glass.
the glass
It was a
circle.
complete circle that's sealed up to the ceiling. So it's not like one that's just like a plate
Yeah.
but this one is
So you
sealed
take
up.
the glass off and then replace the light bulb.
Yeah. Well, the light bulb looked odd. The light coming out of the light bulb with the light switch on was looking odd, and I was looking at it like, is that globe up there really dirty? Why does it have this funny glow to it? And so we got a stool, and I got up on the stool, and I clinked on the side of the globe, and I realized that the globe was full of water.
Fire and water.
The light bulb was on inside this globe, but the globe was full of water. And so I started to undo the screws that hold the globe up, and water started spilling out. It was completely full. So we turned off the light switch. So the light bulb wasn't on now. Unscrewed the globe and took it down and carried it to the sink and poured all that water out into the sink because that globe was completely full. And so you're wondering, where in the heck is this water coming
This
from?
is
That
a
is,
terrible sign.
this is not good so far. We haven't left the kitchen. Where's the water coming from? So there was a there was an attic hole to get into the attic in the hallway. So we brought a ladder in and we opened up the opening into the attic, and I climbed up into the attic. And now this house had been recently painted on the inside. It was very nice, and the ceilings were recently painted. Everything was fresh. But what they had done was they had taken these big plastic tubs up into the attic, and they had placed them wherever there was a leak.
Let the record show that Bobbie's hands are about 2 feet apart.
Yeah.
These are big tubs.
They were big tubs. They were like 10-gallon tubs or something. And there was 3 of them up in the attic placed in strategic locations to catch water leaking through the roof. Now, one of those tubs was back by the kitchen light fixture. It was overflowing. And so it was overflowing in the tub and dripping onto the ceiling and into the light fixture. So now we had about 30 gallons of water up in the attic that we had to carry down in those tubs to get. It might have been more than 10 gallons. There might have been, well, they were a couple feet across and, probably a foot deep. So however many gallons that would be. So then it ended up we needed to put a new roof on. The air conditioner didn't work. Of course, we had to get a stove, redo the plumbing for the stove and the gas line. We had to do some repairs on the electrical because of the damage from the water. That all with my father being a contractor and my father-in-law, who was our broker, having lots of experience in real estate. But that was before you had inspectors.
So you didn't ask your dad to check it out before you bought it?
I don't recall asking him to, but my father-in-law was taking care of everything. So he looked it over and thought,
you were newly married.
Yeah.
You just trusted your new father-in-law.
right. Everybody's got a father-in-law. Everybody's got a brother-in-law. Everybody's got someone, oh yeah, I'll take a look at it. Yeah, that would have been
Few people
23.
buy homes in their early 20s these days.
And that was the last, I say, it was the last of the $29,000 homes in Phoenix. We got it for $29,500. And we ended up doing a lot of work and fixing up and selling and making decent money.
Your dad is a contractor. That helps.
Yeah.
The story behind this, though, is that I wanted to mention, if you're thinking about buying your first home, is the evolution of home inspections. Because in 1970, there weren't home inspectors. As an industry, it didn't exist. It was just getting started where you would call in your buddy who was a plumber or electrician to
Right.
check it out. And if they were electricians, they didn't know about plumbing. If they didn't know about roofing. And so it was just a really cursory, incomplete thing. But as time went on, people started specializing in doing home inspections. It grew and grew in the 70s. And in the 80s, it got big enough that there were enough that it started to get regulated. And in fact, in the 1980s, Texas was the first state to regulate home inspectors. There was a lot of problems with home inspectors where they wanted to get regulated. Is the home inspector would give you a great price on the home inspection, but
Right.
then they would say, "Oh, you need to fix this and this, and here's a company you can go to," and they were making their money on the repairs
Right.
and not on the inspection. So it was a scammy inspection. The real money was telling you to fix things that they really didn't need to get fixed. So in the 90s, the home inspection really took off, and I think all or most every state regulated them. Now it's a great part of the industry. You don't have this downside potential that you did in the olden days where you decided to kind of trust. You get a
Right.
great report, it could be 20, 30, 40 page report, and that lets you know if something's wrong, at least you know going in. And it also helps you in negotiations, typically where you can say, hey, this was a lot worse than I thought. Can you fix it? And the seller, depends on how your contract is written. Oftentimes there's an inspection period where you get to inspect things and you maybe renegotiate the price
Hmm.
or negotiate with the seller to fix things. Or you're looking for deal killers. Maybe you find there's a deal killer in it, that there's something so wrong that you don't even want to buy the place
Right.
anymore. And if it's in the contract, you can cancel that. If it, there's the clause in the contract, and most would, that you can cancel during the inspection period and the buyer can get their earnest money back in full.
Right.
But to remember what it was like back in the 70s, where, oh my gosh, no one even looked in
The attic.
the
No one
crawl
even stuck
space
their
to
head up
see,
in the attic. Yeah.
to see. They would have seen the tubs. Oh boy.
Yeah.
Well, okay. So Bobbie, thanks so much for that story. So we're talking to first-time homebuyers. You got any other tips? Because you've bought a bazillion homes over the years.
I've had about a dozen.
A dozen. Oh, any tips for first-time home
Well,
buyers?
you said exactly what I have found to be true. You put you whether you're the seller or the buyer, um, you want to either have the opportunity to look and see what's up and have the option either to back out completely or to renegotiate the price. Um, and I just sold a home and there were just a half a dozen little minor items, and I agreed to replace the smoke detector and install a carbon monoxide detector and have the air conditioning serviced, but I said I wouldn't fix a little piece of trim that was missing on something. And they wanted this. I said I'll do that, and they agreed, and it slowed the process down like for 3 days. So it was really minor. It's well
Yeah,
worth the money.
that sounds really minor. That's good.
Yeah.
Lots of times people come back and say, fix these 5 things, and at when you do that, you should put your most important thing at the
Right.
top, because it's very common where the seller will say, well, fix 1, 2, and 3, but not 4, 5, and 6.
Exactly.
So they just go down the list and then stop. So you want to make sure your important stuff is at the top
Yeah.
of the list. Any tips on buying a house to live in, Bobbie? Because your newest home is floating in water.
Yeah, I sold my last and bought a boat that I live on now. I guess I've always thought buying a house is a series of compromises. You know, you want a certain area, but in this area, you can't afford your perfect house. But this is the perfect area. Now, your perfect house you could afford if it was in a different area. And so you go through this list. It's like a dichotomous key. You know, you go keep saying this but not that, and that but not this, and it's all a series of compromises. I think if it's your first time, definitely have someone that you're working with that you trust, because there's lots of professional real estate people, but you got to have someone you have a personal rapport with and that you can really not question what they're telling you. So there's this personal relationship thing I think is important.
Yeah, trust is
Um,
super important.
yeah, and so it's all personality driven. Find someone that you click with, and don't be afraid to say, I'm gonna keep looking and not feel pressured. That's what I think. Because that little house that we bought, although it turned out to be a good deal, that little house in Phoenix, we were definitely feeling pressured. that might have led us to hurry up, close the deal before someone came in and offered more money or something like that.
How do you like living in the boat? Or is it a
Um,
ship? I'm sorry.
it's a boat. It's not a ship. It's a 44-foot trawler, 2 bedroom, 2 bath, kitchen. It's very it's a bit of an adventure. It's up in Portland, Oregon. When it's cold out, it's cold in. When it's hot out, it's hot in. Boats are not known for their insulation. It's pretty fun. It's nice to be able to, when the weather's nice, push off and go out on the river and go find a place to anchor and go swimming and
Awesome.
yeah.
Hey, Bobbie, thanks so much for your time. This has really been good.
Very welcome.
I can't believe you walked into the house and there's a flame shooting out the wall.
Yes, I have.
I,
That's a good story, I think.
I had to get that. Okay, thanks everybody. So this is John Wick again with firsttimehomebuyerschool.com, and this is Bobbie Scopa of First Home Story. Take care.